Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So, no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm still your host, Michael Chikeen, and this is No More, No Less. Today, I'm very excited to have Maeshiro with us today. Mike is the founder and CEO of Numa, a spiritual intelligence organization that equips people in theology, spirituality, and faith. Mike is a gay Christian pastor, an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, and a queer theology enthusiast. He travels the world teaching on spiritual intelligence, supernatural discernment, queer theology, emotional health, and redemptive deconstruction. And I hope we get to some of that. I'm very excited for this interview, so let's dive in. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm honored to be here. I'm excited for whatever is about to happen. I love what you're doing, and I love the idea of people coming from different perspectives, getting to have a unifying conversation. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Thank you. One of the reasons, actually, I wanted to have you on the podcast was exactly that to meet great people like you and to challenge myself by engaging with someone who has a completely different worldview from me and see what I can learn and also where we can find common ground as humans. And from just before we hit record, I know we have plenty already. But for people like you who don't know me, I was raised Catholic. I was fairly religious. I was going on walks and talking to God when I was even in my early 20s, in university, and struggling with what do I do about this girl? What do I do after university? There was a seminary actually very close to where I live in my final year of uni. And so I would just go sit in front of this statue. I don't even know what it was, to be honest. And I would kind of just talk to that statue and be like, hey, statue, things aren't going great this week. So just to give you an idea where I've come from, but through much thought and reading certain books and soul searching, in my late 20s, I decided that I was an atheist. And I had to figure out what that meant for my community because everyone around me was Catholic. And then I had 4 or 5 years of being, pretty angry and feeling betrayed by my community and feeling that my life was a bit of a lie, and that transition was quite tough. So when I watched your YouTube video called God Wants Me to Be Gay, and hearing the part of your story about getting kicked out of school and them trying to cleanse you, it was heart-shattering for me to listen to that. And it really brave of you to share that story. And it also, to me, it struck me as very different than what many in the LGBTQ community go after, starting in Christian families. And so I was hoping we could start by maybe you telling the story of when you realized you were gay and what that meant to you. And then if you could share, the getting kicked out of school story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then, I think it's pretty powerful in understanding, your superhero origin story, if you will, your Professor X, perhaps. And then we can move on to some of the amazing work you're doing and everything else.
Yeah, great. Love it. Okay, cool. Thanks. That's fascinating. I wish I could hear more of your story. So I knew I was gay when I was 10. I was in the bathroom by myself, and I knew I was something else earlier than that, but by the time I was 10 years old, I realized, the word gay is what is going on with me. That's what's happening in my life. And that was a really dreadful experience because I was raised Baptist. So gay people were abominations, right? God didn't love these people. They weren't going to inherit the kingdom. They were perverted. All these really horrible messaging about, people that I was a part of. So I, just decided in that moment it wasn't even a decision. It was more like a realization. I'm going to have to hide this for the rest of my life. No one can know, oh God, am I ever going to...
At 10, you had that realization.
Yeah, it was,
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty young. But I had been trained for so long up to that point around how to perceive and relate to gay people. They weren't really people. They were people who had a problem, there wasn't,
Right.
This wasn't an orientation or an identity. It was an affliction people had. So that just very much informed my, the experience of realizing that that's who I was. Anyway, so for the next 8 years, I didn't really ever tell anyone, but I fooled around with my best friend from 12 to 15. He and I were just like,
Hey.
yeah, we just like fooled around. But I was in love with him. It wasn't just like oh, I'm horny. It was like oh my gosh, this is like the best thing I've ever experienced kind of thing. I don't think that was his experience, but anyway, so that was like a deep, shameful secret I carried. And I was always heavily involved in church. And from like early teen years upward, I was often in a leadership role of some kind, whether unofficially or officially. And so that was like a lot of pressure. And, like I understood the expectations and the protocol and all the things. And so I was a walking contradiction to what we valued and whatever. So I just was playing this like secret chameleon game for a long time, which is exhausting. Living in the closet is not a way to live. And so by the time I was 18, this is funny telling this story to an atheist, but when I was 18, I was at a church, I was at the church I was going to, and during Sunday school, it was like a college age Sunday school. Somebody shared this story of a gay guy who was playing the main role of a missionary film for a Christian movie. And he decided to come out to the producers and the director and whatever while they were shooting because he felt like they deserved to know. They gathered and prayed and felt like God wanted this gay guy to play the role. So this girl tells this story in our Sunday school class, and I was not expecting this, but it was the first time in my life I'd ever heard of God being gracious or kind or compassionate to a gay person. I had only ever heard that God hated these people, God was going to throw them in hell, they had no place in the family of God, right? So this is the first time I'd ever even heard the notion that that was possible, and it ruined my life in the best way, but it like fractured my concept of reality.
Right.
On some level, which sounds dramatic, but it was. And so like an hour later, I'm in the main adult service. We're singing the same songs we sing every week, right? Like I know these songs. I don't need to look at the lyrics. I can sing it. But this time something was different. And I started having, I don't know how else to describe it. The verbiage is going to be awkward, but like a spiritual experience. I started like having a very deeply profound, what I would describe as an encounter with God, right?
Right. I think it's better than having like a panic attack. I'm sure so many other kids went through that and they just kind of like just shut down.
Yeah, totally, for sure. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I wasn't expecting this. This wasn't something I thought was going to happen. It wasn't something I was looking for. I didn't know this was even possible. But I started having this profoundly deep, moving, connected experience with this idea of who I didn't even realize I thought God was. And there was some like meaningful exchange that happened there. And then 8 months later, it happened again. This time it was even more dramatic. But in that experience, I heard God, if you will, not heard because I didn't hear it with my audible ears, right? But like inside of myself, there was communication. And they said to me that they wanted me to be this way. And I knew that that wasn't allowed. I knew this was very unbiblical, right? It was very non-Christian for God to say that to me. But it was also very clear that that's what they said. So it was, I also was like, oh, I can never tell anybody that this happened. No one's going to believe me. But it actually changed my life. Like I felt such a profound reconciliation and peace and like knowing with God from that experience. Like I think for that first time in my life, in that moment, I finally got to stop hating myself for being gay. I got to like accept like, oh, you know what? I don't know how and why, but like God and I are good.
How old were you at that time?
I was 18.
Okay. Yeah, because you speak a lot in that YouTube video about these conversations that you have with your perception of God and all these things. And the way that I understood it is that like, I would feel like that you're talking to your, I think we have two sides, right? We have the reptilian brain, we have our emotional selves. And I feel like maybe you were talking to like your emotional self, your inner child that had been ignored for so long and told that his needs were important, his feelings were important, like the only thing important was God. And then as soon as you saw one crack in the armor of this pageantry of Christianity, you that inner child just grabbed onto it and it was like, Mike, it's okay. So I'm sure that I can't even imagine what that feeling was like. I'm sure like spiritual is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, totally. So that's fascinating. I love hearing your perspective and how you'd interpret all that. It's so interesting.
And then after that, I guess, just briefly, because it does sound like quite a emotional part. Like I would just like people to hear about how you were treated in school. when you were kicked out. Do you mind
Yeah.
telling that story? It's okay if
Sure.
you don't want.
No, yeah, I don't mind.
Okay.
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
So, fast forward a few years, I ended up in a ministry school in California. This actually like renowned charismatic ministry school. So I did first and second year there. But my second year, skipping all the drama and the details, basically, I had a friend who was very close to me. I kind of put her in like a mentor role in my life. And anytime that they had some kind of ministry opportunity where they wanted to like pray for gay people, people who were struggling with being attracted to the same sex, like God would heal them, like it was time for them to get whole and to experience, being restored and redeemed and becoming straight and all this stuff. And
Right.
I just never felt safe or compelled or interested in participating in any of it. I absolutely wanted to be healed at that point. I wanted to change. I wanted to be straight.
Okay.
I wanted that, out here, ignoring the story I'm telling you about my encounters with God or, all
Right.
that.
Well,
I
it's a
want,
direct opposition of everyone in your life.
right,
Like
exactly.
that's an enormously thing to overcome.
Right. Seriously. So I wanted to fit in. I wanted to honor my leaders and my culture and my tradition and my religion. I wanted to be the right version of what I was supposed to be in the place that I identified with or whatever. But none of those invitations ever felt safe or like fitting for me. So I just didn't engage. And she kept getting really mad at me for not pursuing my healing or not subjecting myself to the opportunities that were being provided to me or whatever.
Wow.
So anyway, at the end of the school, she basically came to me a week before school was going to end of second year. And she was like, I'm tired of hearing people talk about you and girls having crushes on you and thinking that something could happen when I know nothing can happen. I'm tired of pretending like I don't know any better. You're not addressing this. You're not fixing it. You're not doing anything to change this. So I just want you to know, like, the next time something like that comes up, I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not going to pretend like this is fine or true.
Right.
And I was like, basically outing me, right? And I told her, like,
Right.
wow, that sucks. I don't think that's your place. Thanks for telling me. I'm glad to at least know what you're thinking.
Yeah, but you suck.
But yeah, like that's not your business. Like, so I don't think that's appropriate. And so she left, and I went to my room and just laid on my bed, and then like these hot, random tears just were coming out of my face, and I was not even connected to my emotions when that was happening. I just knew like something dramatic, something deep that I didn't understand was happening. It was terror and like also like the threat of freedom, like at the same time. So it was like a mixed emotion of like, this
Right.
could ruin my life, but also my life kind of sucks in this place. So like, do I want my life to be ruined? Like maybe this is like going to be helpful. I don't know. And I didn't have like resolve or like clarity about that. I just had emotion coming out.
Right.
And then like the next day, my pastor that I was assigned to in school pulled me into a meeting randomly and just wanted to check in, which was weird because I'd tried to meet with him a few times throughout the year and he'd never responded to my texts or emails. So I just kind of assumed he was too busy and let it go. But I wanted to talk to him about, the shame that I was carrying from my middle school sexual adventures and like my hidden sexual desires and whatever. Never responded to me. But then at the end of the year, the day after she talked to me, he pulls me into a meeting and starts asking me about my experience at school and how's the year going. And then at
How
the end of the
convenient.
and you think in hindsight, you're like, Mike, come on, bro, like put it together. How did you not see this coming? But I was still so naive and like,
Sure.
I just believed the best about the whole environment and the leaders, especially. Like, of course, they would never do anything to hurt me or like they wouldn't prioritize other things over my well-being. Like that wouldn't happen. Anyway, so
Well,
at the end of the meeting,
you've been gaslighted for your whole life.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you don't just switch on hit a switch where you're like, oh, all of these people now don't have my best interest in heart when you
Right.
thought you did. I don't know. I don't think there's any way for you to have seen through that until the moment that seems like you did.
Yeah, thanks. It actually took me a while, even after some of these experiences, to recognize what was happening, which is embarrassing, but true. Because, I was a diehard, committed, loyal, submitted, what they would say, a son of the house. That's the language we would have used. And
Right.
now I just, like, cringe at, a lot of this. But anyway, at the end of the meeting, he was like, so are you dating anybody? Are you interested in anyone? Are there girls that like pulling your interest? And I was like, this is such a random what? I was like, no, actually, I'm in a place where I'm working on myself and I need to not be dating anybody right now. And then I told him like, I actually wanted to talk to you about this part of my life this year. I'm hoping maybe at some point we could get together. I'd love to talk to you about this or whatever. Anyway, a few days later, it's like literally the last day of school. They have this knighting ceremony. So the two like main guys of the school have swords and they like knight you, right? Ceremoniously. And so I'm like in line waiting with my friends to go get knighted, and I get a text from my pastor. He's like, "Hey, are you here today? I need to talk to you today." And I was like, "Whoa, yeah, I'm about to get knighted." He's like, "Find me after." I was like, "Okay." So I go get knighted. I go through this whole like tunnel and whatever. At the end of it, he pulls me out randomly out of this like experience that was happening. We didn't talk to anyone. He just like whisked me upstairs and took me to the guy who's in charge of all of second year into his office. It was just the two of us. And I was like, "Oh, something's wrong. This is so weird." It's the atmosphere of this whole exchange was really awkward and like intense. And so I sat down. He sits me down. He's like, "Mike, I've been hearing disturbing reports about you." And I was like, "What?" And I'm like immediately thinking like, "Okay, did I not turn in a homework assignment? Like, did I like forget something? Like, what am I missing?" I was like genuinely so caught off guard. I was not expecting him to say that. I didn't know what he meant.
Right.
I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I think you know what I mean." And I was like, "What?" And I'm realizing like, oh my God, this is a very different conversation than I could have anticipated.
Right.
What is he talking about?
And it's even worse because it's passive aggressive.
Totally. Yeah, this was so terribly handled. I was not set up for success. I was not looked after or cared for in this process. I was interrogated, and yeah, it was awful. And so I like racked my brain, and then it, like just randomly, my conversation with my friend like a week prior, about her outing me, like came in my mind. I was like, "Is this about so and so?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh God." And I immediately realized like, oh shoot, she probably said something to someone or whatever. So I just started like confessing the things I wanted to talk to him about that I never had the chance to. I just started like telling him, "Okay, so I'm assuming it's about this. Yeah, this happened. I wanted to tell you earlier." And my posture was like, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I felt so guilty and like I'd been found out and whatever. And so, I kind of bare my soul and it's humiliating. And he goes, "Well, Mike, you can see how it feels like you've been lying to me all year." And I was like, "What?" And I'm sitting here thinking like, how do I respond? Because I don't want to like combat him. I don't want to come across as rebellious or like I'm an orphan, right? I want to come across offended. Like there's all these things that you get like easily tagged in that environment with that invalidate anything you have to say at that point. So I'm trying not to like come across as one of those illegal postures, right? But also like, I'm like, I did not lie to you. Like, that's not true. So I'm trying to figure out how do I respond to this leader who's like saying some pretty like incriminating things against me without breaking the rules, right? So I was like, wow, I'm sorry that it feels like that. That's definitely not my intention. That was not how, like what I was trying to do. And he was like, "Mike, this is really concerning. I need to talk to leadership about this. Can you hang around here for a little bit? I'm going to go talk to them and we'll meet up again." And I was like, okay. So on the way down the stairs, I still cringe remembering this. I told him, "Hey, whatever you guys decide needs to happen, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna just yield to your decision."
Right.
He was like, "Thanks," and then went to the meeting. And 40 minutes later, he calls me back in. The head of second year is in the room this time, and my pastor tries to like tell me what's about to happen, and it's not clear, and he's not doing it well. So the head guy steps in. He's like, "Mike, here's the deal. We have two components of what we expect from our students. There's the academic side, which you pass with flying colors, and then there's the character side. And based on what's happening here, we expect our students to represent themselves, to seek out what they need, to get their needs met, to like pull on whatever they need in the environment to like address what's going on in their process. You've not done that. Based on how you've participated this year, we don't feel like we can graduate you." And at that point I was like, "Oh, what? I'm about to not graduate?" The graduation ceremony was in 5 hours. I was like, "Is this a joke? Like, what's happening?" I was like, I just kind of like blacked out for a second. I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about anymore. Like this is so bizarre. And I also feel like this big and like so uninformed about what's going on here. So basically they end up telling me that they care about me. They love me. They want to see me on a purity plan. They want to help me support me in getting the help that I need. Right. So I got to go to the inner healing ministry get help from a certain person in that place. I'm going to go to the men's purity group and like be part of the men's sexual purity group and like kind of participate in like confessing my sins there and like getting reparative therapy basically. And then there was counseling that I was going to get to step into and whatever. So then they would follow up with me after I've gone through these steps and see where I was. And we would just go from there. And I was like, okay, great. I'll do all of that.
But how did you feel at that point? Because like even every time you say like the ministry, I feel like this is like a terribly dark Harry Potter movie. so like at that point when you're like that you're gay, that like these purity things, or maybe you didn't know that they weren't going to do anything. But how did you feel that going into that process?
Listen, I knew they weren't going to do anything, but in an environment like that with that kind of perspective and worldview, there's always the who knows what God could do. right?
Right.
So I knew, like, nothing ever in my life had ever influenced or adjusted my sexual attraction. Nothing had ever, no matter what I tried. And I had gotten a couple of random side books in the past that I would like check out by myself. Like, no one could know that I was reading them. I literally had like secret places in my room that I would hide these books that were going to help me not be gay. I talked to a couple different people. I'd heard different ministries. Like, nothing had ever shifted or impacted me in that area. I knew like nothing was going to change this on a human level. But God could do anything, right? So there's always this like offshoot chance that something supernatural and radical could happen.
Right.
So I went into the inner healing ministry experience with like, listen, I mean, I was terrified. I was really uncomfortable. I didn't know what to expect, but I was like, listen, if I can get healed or changed here, like, I'm open. I would love that. That'd be amazing. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I'm open. Like, who knows? Maybe this person is whatever. So I had 3 sessions with him. It was like 3 different hour-long, at least, sessions. And by the third one, he was like, yeah, Mike, we're good. We're done. And I was like, what? We are not done. Nothing has happened. Like, I am the same person I was when I showed up here. What are you talking about? He's like, we've explored everything. Nothing's wrong with you. Like, you're good. I'm like, I didn't say this to him, but I was so angry because inside I was like, bro, I'm still gay. What do you mean nothing's wrong with me? Nothing changed. Like, you didn't. What did you do?
Right.
Anyway,
And,
so
you
I
know,
was
like I'm laughing because this is so absurd, and I think you seem like pretty far removed from it now. But like, there's just so many like even jokes to make it. Like, what's he doing? There's like a poster of Margot Robbie behind him. And he's like, so, what do you think? Anything? Come on, there's got to be something. Like, look at her.
my gosh. Yeah,
Like,
totally.
And so, like, at what point after that, like, horrific experience, were you able to, like, let go of all the chains and completely be like, no, this is who I am. Like, this is, you know, as you would think, like, God made me this way, and this is who I am, and it's awesome. Like, did that take a lot of time after that experience?
Yeah, it wasn't until 8 years later that I finally accepted myself.
Right.
Because I did all the things, I jumped through all the hoops, I checked off all the boxes, I was given a clean bill of health. So I just like basically like shoved my sexuality down and like said like, because I wasn't acting out, I wasn't like fooling around with guys, I wasn't like looking at porn, like I wasn't doing any of those things that would make me more guilty. So I could get away with like my own conscience being like, yeah, you know, like I struggle with being attracted to men, but I'm not actively like participating in anything homosexual, right? So I can be straight passing on some level and then just deal with what attraction I don't have toward women and see if anything could maybe somehow functionally happen down the road with a girl. Who knows? And there was no part of me that wanted that, but I knew that was my ticket to be acceptable here. So I was like just basically trying to figure out how to allow myself to experience that whilst also just being very much a part of the circus, right, of everything that was going on there. Right. And so I just started getting promoted and growing in my visibility and influence in that environment. I started teaching in the school that I got kicked out of. I started leading.
Hold on. I really just need to stop you there for obvious reasons. But like, so they think being gay is a sin, yada, yada, yada. You've had these 3 sessions. And then they just continue not only to help you graduate and all these things, but they're promoting you through leadership.
Yeah, well, it took. I mean, this was like 3 years.
What the hell?
It was through years. So I went through a couple years of being in the men's purity group, and like, you know, in any group that I was part of, I was often like, I would get promoted or whatever, and so I started like they asked me to lead a group in the men's purity group. I'm like, I don't want to lead a group here. I am here to be helped. Please don't make me a leader here. I don't want it. So I pushed it off for several months, and they just needed help. And they're like, Mike, you're good. You're one of the healthiest guys in this room. Like, can you help? I'm like, oh my God. And I'm still secretly like gay, right? So I'm like, this is unbelievable. So I did anyway, and that was like a whole other. I could write a book about my experience there and that.
Right.
But anyway,
part two.
Yeah,
part two.
Totally. God, I don't talk about my time in there because it was like such a sensitive, vulnerable place for a lot of the guys, right? It's like, anyway. I also like went to a couple of like pretty higher up counselors there, and I could also share some pretty horrible experiences I had in those counseling sessions that these guys don't know what they're talking about. This is so not apappropriate for someone who was like me. Yeah, it was terrible. So I'm
really sorry that you had to go through that. Like that, like I can't imagine it. But I appreciate you sharing, because I think more people should like that shit's got to stop.
For
Like,
sure.
I
Agreed.
guess,
Agreed.
but from you being a Baptist, I think the Baptist is like let's say the 10 is like the super Christians. Where are the Baptists? Are they 10? Are they
They're
like
like an
9?
8, 9, 10, depending on what. Well, Baptists, like there's a range of Baptists, so it really depends on what kind of Baptist we're talking about.
Okay,
But,
fair enough.
yeah.
So I guess my question is like, where do you understand how this gay is bad even entered Christianity? Like, is it everything derived from like Adam and Eve? Because as far as I know, aside from that lay with the man sort of thing in the Old Testament, there's nothing that says being gay is wrong, and we have so much evidence from like the Greeks, the Romans, that there was such fluidity in gender and sex and all of it. So do you have any idea of where this nonsense came from that now is like stamped into Christianity, that like if you have feelings towards men, you just stamp that out? That's just the decision that you make, like what you're going to have for lunch.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's coming from a few different tenets of like how people are indoctrinated within Christian culture. Adam and Eve is a big part of it. So there's a verse in Genesis 2, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. There's a commandment that Adam and Eve are to, be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it. And so Christians started deriving these fundamental basic principles about why humans even exist. And some of the definitions for that are, we are here to procreate. That is a major function for the fulfillment of humanity's destiny or purpose. Procreation, which many intellectual people who've participated in this conversation have debunked that and been like, this is absurd. That is not true. That's not even what the Bible is going after. But most indoctrinated Christians who don't know what they're talking about believe that on a fundamental level. A lot of right-wing conservative political people believe the reason people exist is to procreate within a monogamous heterosexual relationship, right?
Right. Which will inevitably end the planet with overpopulation. But that's
right.
I mean, that's altogether.
Yeah. Anyway, so that obviously goes in other directions, but it's coming from, so Genesis 2 is a big derivative for where these like strong beliefs are coming from. The New Testament, this changed in 1946. The translations in English started to use the word homosexual instead of the other words that had always been used for the last 2,000 years. And so we've got verses in the English translations that were coming out since the 1940s saying homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom. God gave them over to their lusts, and they were inflamed with lust for each other. Right? These verbiage started to like point at what modern translators assumed they were talking about: homosexuals, gay people. Even though that was never the verbiage up until then, they finally updated the language to rightly address the scourge that's being confronted in these verses, right? And so it became about gay people, like 80 years ago or whatever. So that's another major contributing factor to how and why this has become what it is in the church. Am I answering your question?
Fascinating. Yeah, I had no idea about any of that, and that really does help. I thought they just grabbed onto something at some point and started to run with it, because again, a lot of the religiosity doesn't make so much sense to me. So I just assumed that makes the most sense, to be honest. That some jerk translator was like da, 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 and that just changed the history for the last 150 years or whatever. Yeah. I really want to talk about, because on your site, I believe, or perhaps it was on the video, where you think there's problems with the church, and I don't know which way you want to go, because I'd like to talk about maybe how you're approaching Christianity in your work. And then the problems with the church. So I don't know if one would inform the other, so you can choose which one we start with.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll start with how I'm approaching it, and then we'll get into the problems.
Sure.
Because the reason... I spent the last year and a half aggressively deconstructing my Christian upbringing. Like the beliefs.
Oh, hold on. I think, can you define... Because I've seen people on socials that are deconstructing. Can you define that for the audience?
Sure. So when I say that word, because people can mean different things when they say it, there's a general broad, direction that means. But for me, I'm taking assumed, sacred, like unchallengeable beliefs that the Bible has given us empirically, right? And I'm saying, is that true? Is that what the Bible's saying? Even if the Bible is saying it, is the Bible accurate here? Is the Bible authoritative in making that claim? Is that actually like appropriate to believe, or is something else going on, right? So that's asking those questions, doing the work, doing the research, pulling it apart, using your rational faculty, your critical thinking,
Right.
reason, right? Which are not huge values in Christianity, right? They're valued somewhere way lower on the list than other things, right?
Well, that's why I think you really are a unicorn in this space, because most people that go through this deconstruction, they come out reading the God Delusion as I did, and you're like, oh, I'm an atheist now. But so yes, so sorry, I'd love to hear like where you stopped, and you're like, okay, this is where I want to live. This is the area where I want to be.
Yeah. Okay, great. I don't know that I've stopped. I would say I'm speaking and expressing from a place that I currently am, and I'm assuming I'm going to continue to evolve and grow and change in the things that I'm holding on to. The reason I still speak to the Christian space, I have a couple different reasons, but the reason I still believe in God is because of the several life-changing experiences I had. I would say they were internal. They were happening inside of me, but like they were different than, other, personal development, growing experiences that I've had, like pivotal moments, like, oh, like I'm learning, I'm realizing these things, these aha, like, whoa, this is coming from my trauma. I've learned it. Oh, I'm like, that's a lot of growing up, right? And like self-parenting and whatever. These other experiences, I don't know how to describe them in this context other than like using the word spiritual, like
lightning bolt.
Sure. Well, like not just like dramatic or intense, but like the nature of the love I was touching, the depth, the profundity, the expansion that I was experiencing as an individual, the way it changed the way that I perceive other human beings and like what we're doing here. It changed my life, like in spite of my theology. It actually is the reason I was willing to like confront and challenge some of the things, even when I was still under that umbrella. Because even when I was teaching at this,
wow. No, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like,
so even when I was teaching at the school, I was known as being like someone who was pushing the envelope and asking questions and speaking about this stuff in ways that nobody else there was doing that. And so I think that was part of the appeal for people taking my classes was like, who is this guy? Where is this stuff coming from? And it was coming from these deeply transformative experiences that I'd had that I would say with God or because of God, right?
Right.
Anyway, so that I don't know how to get rid of that. I have such mad respect for atheists. I think that's like I have such an appreciation. They used to be like so demonized and evil in this like bottom of the barrel when I was in deep entrenched Christianity. But now I'm like, my God, I think I know more atheists that have better character and integrity than like most of the Christians that I know, right? In terms of how they manage and like engage in conversation and what they believe and represent.
Well,
so
even just a short anecdote, like when I was in that 5-year angry period when I would realize I was atheist, I remember being at a party with a bunch of friends. We're we're at a house party before we're going to go out. And I'm just like having a conversation with someone, and there's a few people in there I know that are super religious. Like one of my best friends, we were at his house. His mom's license plate is like "I bless you." You know what I mean? Like these are people that I love and care for, and they're all amazing. And I said to someone that I didn't even think was loud, like, "Oh yeah, I'm I decided I'm atheist now." And I was just having small talk. And honestly, my memory of it, I'm sure it wasn't this dramatic at all, but my memory was like record scratch, and everyone was like, what? Like, that's how I remember experiencing it. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, I'm different now. Yeah. Like, the way I perceive the world and maybe how they perceive me is now different. And another friend of mine who, like, he's a Catholic school teacher, reads at Mass, we were out having fun, drinking or whatever, and we started like talking about religion a little bit. And he even said, he goes, Mike, I would never have a debate with you in religion because I know you probably know more about it than I do. I just don't think about it. And but for me, I respected that so much because he's like, this is what I believe. This is what I want to believe. And I'm not going to, and him and I are still super close, but I realize like, where are the boundaries I should push and who's, what people I should push them with. Yeah. And, I have friends that will still try to rile me up with something just for fun now. But like, yeah, the whole thing of deconstruction is like anytime, like even off the air, you want to talk about stuff like that. I'd be more than happy to. So I guess like you going through your deconstructionist phase, where do you think you stopped enough to say this is where I want to build like your coaching, your community, and like and who you're serving?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, because here's the thing. I'm not done. I haven't stopped. Where I have like landed in terms of being able to be proactive and intentional about like serving and helping people in this area is pulling back so much of the dogma and like unchallenged rhetoric within Christianity that's actually harmful for people, even the people who believe it. Not just them imposing their beliefs on other people's freedoms, but also for themselves. Like the reduction of the life they're allowed to live based on these really oppressive beliefs. I'm like, I want to help, particularly Christians. I don't just want to help Christians, but I want to help Christians because I feel so endeared to that struggle. Like, yo, you believe in this certain kind of a God, but your Christian tenets actually contradict the nature of that God you say you believe in. And you've been taught by gatekeepers how to ineffectually reconcile the nature of this altruistic, unconditionally loving, gracious God with this really oppressive, exclusive, harmful religion. It doesn't make sense. And you know it doesn't. You don't want to have to face that. So you just accept whatever easy Band-Aid you're given in the community to just answer that. Right. It's not an answer. It's an avoidant Band-Aid. You're just excusing it, right? Right. I want to help those people who genuinely want to walk in their authentic expression of their faith and regard for other people. I want to help those people. I don't want to help people who are like committed to being bigoted, right? But,
no, that would be a nightmare for both of you. But I mean, like, so if someone comes to you like that, and the person that's open, like your ideal client, how do you help them go back into Christian? Maybe it's not Christianity. Maybe it's just the spirituality with God in their life. Like, how do you help them go back? Because like everything that you just said sounds like, okay, religion's bunk. You need to get out of it, and you'll live a happier, more fulfilled, deeper life. But how do you keep them in like the God world, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't have any need to keep them in the God world. I don't need to.
Right.
I don't mind if someone working with me becomes an atheist, even though I'm not. If that's where they end up, I'm good with that. I don't need them to believe in God. I don't need anybody to believe in anything anymore. I just need people to stop being harmful with what they believe in a way that's negatively impacting other people, right? I have a huge value for ritual. I have a huge value for tradition. I have a huge value for community. I think those things are important, and some people will derive more value from those things than others.
Sure.
Religion has tended to meet those needs, right? But religion brings with it a whole lot of other things that are actually working against people's benefit or flourishing. So I'm holding that against religion is like a lot of the religious conversation requires that you draw a line between you and the people who don't believe like you. They become othered, like you described that, record scratch party moment. Coming out as a gay person, I knew what was going to happen to me. I knew, you know what I mean? There was like no doubt how I was going to be responded to for choosing to be honest and authentic.
Right.
I knew it. I still got mad having to experience it because of the injustice of it all, but it's also like embedded into the whole thing. So I think the exclusive, condemning, holier than thou, supremacist ideology within Christianity specifically is so harmful for the person believing it, let alone the people that they affect for believing those things.
Right. And just to draw a line between like my experience and yours is that like that record scratch is how I felt in the moment, but like I was still best man at that guy's wedding, and I was still in wedding parties, and like they never treated me any different, but I just knew from like everyone's reaction that something had changed. So like I'm sure my perception of it is much more serious than it actually was. But talking about how you were saying how dangerous religion is, I wrote something down that I would love to get your feedback on, because something you wrote. So you wrote on your website and maybe it was an article I read, that you were declaring war on conformity, pretending, manipulation, self-hatred, ignorance, and deception. I love that. But I would also argue that there's a strong case to be made that believing in a personal God, like a religion, especially where hell's concerned, it promotes all the things that you're trying to fight against, especially hell, as a way to manipulate like children into early conformity. And like original sin to me, and the word sin is like the foundation for self-hatred. Like I'm still trying to get rid of Catholic guilt that was like poured on me en masse for most of my life. And I consider myself atheist, but these ideas that are so ingrained, like it's hard to excavate all of them.
Totally.
I'd love your perspective for how you might see it differently or maybe not.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. I'm going to say this out loud. At this point of my deconstruction, like I've done the due diligence and the scholarship, the academic grunge work, right, to like reconcile why I believe what I do. For a long time before I came out and before I deconstructed, I lost my value. I lost my fear of hell. I lost my value for it. I stopped talking about it almost entirely. And sin also started losing its relevance. It wasn't completely gone until I deconstructed, but a byproduct of my research and all of this, and the way my perspective about what the Bible even is and how we're meant to treat it has changed so intensely that sin to me is irrelevant to this conversation. And I agree, it is like a very strong proponent for self-hatred. It is like like an anchor for people to devalue themselves and to be debased and experience the worthlessness that comes with having to like put that to the degree that it actually is supposed to be believed.
That's a
and I think it's really What?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's really harmful and like irrelevant because like again, like just to reference those experiences that I had with God, I'm putting air quotes on that for you. Like,
very kind. Very kind.
Yeah, right. Those experiences, sin was not relevant. It didn't come up. It was not a concern. It wasn't a problem. Hell had nothing. Like, it's actually those experiences that like did away with my fear of hell at that point. Like, it stopped being a concern. I was like, this person, I don't care if hell exists or not. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant here. So because like what was happening to me, I was like, even if I go to hell, I don't care. I don't care where I end up. I'm not trying to secure a spot in any particular destination here. I'm in this for the person that I'm encountering, this being that I'm interfacing with. I want to be with this person. I don't care where I go. It was kind of like my heart posture, right? So at this point, though, I'm convinced that hell's not a place. I don't believe that hell is a thing. I don't think God eternally torments people consciously. I don't think that's real. I think this is insane. But that's a big part of Christianity. Some people won't consider you a Christian if you don't believe in hell, right?
Oh, right.
Which is crazy.
Virgin
but then
birth,
also
yada yada yada.
Yeah, and then to push it, like, I understand sin is an intensely major focus in the Bible, and like, it's a big part of why Jesus died. I'm putting air quotes on that. Right. I think sin is an outdated tool that was serving its purpose for when the authors of the Bible were doing their work and trying to like reconcile and make sense of the world and holiness and the cosmos and this condition of mankind as they saw it. Like, I understand, I think, why they said what they did and saw things the way they did. I just think that was an ancient way of understanding things. We know way better now. And now, based on what we know about the world, sin actually doesn't have a function anymore. It's not appropriate. We don't need this mechanism, along with a lot of other things that the Bible, brings up a lot. I think some of those things have been done away with because of their writing from their perspective to a world that also shared their perspective, right? We know so much different about so many things now than these biblical authors knew. And I think the people who wrote this stuff, if they were learned today, they'd look at what they wrote and realize, wow, they have done some crazy stuff with what we wrote back then. Don't these people know how to think? Like, that's obviously, we didn't know these things. We should, like, I think that's absolutely how these authors would respond to what they wrote. But Christians are locking these guys in as like being all-knowing and divinely inspired, therefore authoritative in everything they said. And if you're going to be a Christian, you have to believe everything these guys said, no questions, which means you can't think critically through any of this. You can't ask questions. You can't challenge these things. You can't reimagine or rethink what they might have meant contextually. You can't do any of that work. And I'm like, this is asinine. You're asking people to like debase themselves and remain juvenile in their ability to navigate their life, even though they're continuing to grow. And
debase and devalue is amazing, and I'm going to really take that on board, those two words, because I want to share two stories with you that I really haven't told many people. So one thing that was really a big lightning bolt for me, being like, oh, this is all bullshit. I was just like, I can't remember. I think I was at home. I was supposed to go to bed, and I was just like, I had been thinking about these ideas for a while now, and I was thinking about the concept of heaven itself, and as far as it pertains to Catholicism. And I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. I'm good all my life. I do good things, but I go to heaven, but a lot of people in there are people that will have confessed on their deathbeds, confessed throughout their whole life, and all I could think of, and I was maybe mid-20s, I'm like, so I'm going to have to go to heaven and hang out with all the assholes I don't want to hang out with here? I go, this does not seem like it makes sense.
Totally.
At all. And so like it was things like that led me to read The God Delusion. I can't remember where I found it, by Dawkins. And the way I explain it to people is that, like, so if religiosity is like this, and Christianity's over here and atheism's over here, while reading The God Delusion, and he's like the atheist of atheists, like I have to see, like, okay, he has this idea. Am I here, or am I here, or am I here on all of these issues? And I really couldn't argue with a lot of them. Like, I would read a chapter, I'd read it again, I'd think about it, and I'd be like, shit, I think I'm kind of over here. And then I couldn't even bring myself to read the final chapter about, like, how raising kids in religion is child abuse, because I'm like, oh, that's going to make me way too angry. Like, I think we're done. And I still have not read that chapter, and I don't think I will. But to share a more personal story is that, like, even growing up and the idea of gay, it was always used as a pejorative. Like, I grew up Italian Canadian, and in those more like, I'll get into air quotes, like the more like manly, machista sort of, misogynist sort of communities, which the friends I had weren't, but they still were enough. And so, like, the idea of gay was always a pejorative. Like, the idea, oh, you're gay, oh, that's gay, or like it was just in the air. You know what I mean? Like, there were racist jokes being thrown around. Like, it was a time that, like, it didn't feel good, but you're like, oh, that's funny, and you don't even know what you're saying. And so it was even into, like, my 20s, because growing up, I didn't consider myself like a guy's guy, manly man. Like, I like playing sports, but I also love boy bands, and I loved, like, I wanted to take singing lessons. I wanted to go maybe be an actor. Like, like all of these things was like, I don't want to do all this other shit. Like, that none of that seems fun to me. Like, I don't care about cars. I don't care about like all of these things. And so there was part of me that was like, am I gay? Maybe like it would come into my head just because it was seen as such a bad thing, and I was never attracted to guys. Like, the idea of the action never crossed my mind at all. But just because I saw myself as different than this idea of what masculinity and manhood should be, and how bad it was in Christianity, I was like every so often be like, shit, I hope not. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it would just kind of be one of those thoughts that are distressing when it passes your mind. But as soon as I realized I was atheist, and I reevaluated my whole life and my whole lens in which I viewed life, and all of a sudden, like, being gay was just fine because it's normal and it's how people are. I was like, oh, I'm not gay. That's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, it really was like a switch. Yeah. But like every now and then, those thoughts cross my mind, and so that's why when I remember thinking, like, oh, if I am, this is what it might mean to my life and community. So watching your video, like, that's why I'm like, shit, like, this guy had to deal with all of that for so many years, and that's why, like, all your stories were so heartbreaking to me. And thanks. So, like, it makes me super happy that, like, that, you found yourself and you kind of reconcile, like now you're whole, I would say, and that you're doing such great work. Thank you. But with that said, let's dive into all the problems with the church. This is going to be a 5-hour podcast, and so we only have a little bit of time left. But where do you want to start?
Oh my gosh! So I just want to say, first of all, we don't have enough time. There are so many problems that I see with the church for different reasons and different layers and whatever. So I used to travel and speak all over internationally. People would fly me out for conferences or whatever, and I would be speaking in their churches, and I started noticing the same problem repeatedly. People would come up to me and ask for prayer, and this avatar in front of me, it's the same person no matter what the culture was. Christianity was producing a certain kind of person. These people were dependent, they were needy, they were powerless, usually like in a pretty desperate state. And someone else had access to the answers they needed. Someone else had the connection to God that they didn't, that was keeping them from getting the results they wanted. And I was like, this is not producing what I anticipated when I signed up for this gig. This is definitely not what I see Jesus talking about in the Bible. Something's wrong. Like, we have created a system forget theology, just like the way the church structure works, we have created a bunch of spectators who have been indoctrinated and conditioned to be passive and to observe other people, the special on the stage elite, few, doing the stuff that matters. The rest of the people in the room, the majority of the congregants, are there to give money and be dependent on the small few decision makers who move and shake what's actually going on and is exciting about being part of the faith. I was like, this is not it. Something's wrong. So it wasn't even about theology. That was just structure. The structure itself, I'm like, this is problematic. Having one person talking to everyone else, everyone's facing the same direction, they're all listening to this one. That's a problem. The whole groupthink, the moment you think something different than the rest of the group has decided you're supposed to think, you become an outsider. It sounds like your friends were a lot more tolerant and permissive for you, but I was getting.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I was getting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, good.
Everyone that I think when I said when we had gay jokes and racist jokes, I think we were just idiot teenagers in the early 90s that you're in this children of immigrants from Europe community, and these things are propagated on TV and movies, and you're kind of just repeating them. And it's not till you're maybe in your mid 20s or 30s when you're like, oh, that was all terrible. We shouldn't have been doing any of that. Yeah. But and now all of my friends would agree with me. So I was lucky the people I was surrounded with were open-minded to be like, okay, they're more religious. I'm not. We love each other, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, totally love that. That's awesome. That wasn't my experience.
Sure.
And so there's this also a strong, and the thing is, to use this word is probably going to sound politicized, and people who are in this culture will defend themselves against it because it's so horrible. But Christianity has a supremacist culture. Genuinely, you believe.
Preach.
Yeah, you believe you are better than everyone else. You would not say it like that. But the actual value you hold in your heart is you are God's chosen. You might use the word elect, predestined, maybe. Some of them wouldn't, right? But you are called by God. You've seen the light. You got saved. It was revealed to you.
Right. And you're called to save other people. And who saves other people? Heroes. So you're now the hero of this ridiculous story.
Right. So yeah, you become part of this savior mechanism that Christianity is offering to this depraved world of a bunch of losers who don't know any better, right?
Right.
And so you genuinely do perceive other people who don't know Jesus or aren't saved as debased in their mind. They might be intelligent or educated, but they're deceived, right? And so whatever they have to offer is actually stunted. It's limited. It's
right
down there. Christians, it doesn't matter what your background is or your level of experience or expertise or how much energy and effort you've put into actually knowing what you're talking about. If you're saved, we're going to listen to you more because you're part of us. You know God. You're part of the in-crowd, spiritually elite, enlightened group or whatever. No one says it like this, right? I'm using this language on purpose to confront that. But when you're in it, you don't think about it that way. You don't believe. Right. You don't think that that's what you're doing.
It's inherent.
It's built in, right? But I'm when I started stepping away and experiencing the consequence of that kind of ecosystem that I was part of and started stepping out of, I'm this is horrible. And I got to be very explicit about what it was like because it was in me. I specifically noticed it when I would start when I got on the apps and started talking to other gay men and started actually dating other guys, the indignation and the elitist attitude that was coming up in me, judging them for the things they were talking about, they wanted to do, they were honest about. I'm
wow.
I was what is this coming out of me? This is horrible. Right. I was such a supremacist, elitist a-hole in the way that I was judged. I didn't say any of this to anyone. That's
fascinating.
But it was in my soul. I'm where is this coming? And I had to do some very real work of obviously first just getting honest with myself about what's there. And then undoing this. Why do I think it's okay to think about this? Think about people like this. This is not okay. And it took work to find where this came from and why, and then dismantle that, right? And I'm still getting to do that work, but it's entrenched. Christians believe they're better than everyone else. And it's probably not unique to Christianity, but that kind of dynamic just fosters that type of worldview, and it's not helpful.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of groupthink. You can take any of the big religions, and you end up falling on that side. Jews are the chosen one. Islam, if you leave, you're an apostate. All of these things is the heart driven through a lot of at least the Abrahamic religions. I don't believe Mormons or Buddhists. I don't believe they have this sort of idea, but the ones that came from, the olden days books, then those are the ones that are this is our team. The other teams all suck.
No, I think actually Mormons are on that side. They do have like a strong.
Oh, really? But they
yeah.
have a better sense of humor, maybe. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a big problem. I think the way that leaders are, like the way you're taught to relate to like authority figures within Christian culture is like very concerning. It's disempowering. You're being groomed to be vulnerable to predatory behavior. It's easy to be taken advantage of in that space. So anybody who starts calling that out or confronting that or not subjecting themselves to it anymore is seen as, we might use the word apostate. No one would use that word anymore, but you were treated as such. Like, whoa, you don't belong here. You're a rebellious person. You have a Jezebel spirit. They have lots of ways of labeling and tagging you for why you don't belong anymore.
So you used the word groomer for a second.
Yeah.
And I hear Christians use it a lot in the States right now by putting it all on Democrats to dehumanize them and to say, oh, you're a groomer. You're trying to introduce them to homosexual culture and the homosexual agenda, or whatever nonsense they're saying. And do you find it interesting, if not infuriating, that they're using that term when Christians themselves are like very obviously grooming children to become more Christian and to do all of these things and to devalue and to debase themselves and all of these things?
Yeah, it is infuriating. It's so hypocritical. It's such a double standard. I mean, if I think about it long enough, I could get very upset and want to break things. It's absurd.
Right.
It's absurd.
There's a lot of rage rooms in the States right now, so you could go and let it fly.
Yeah, I've got a lot of material I could take with me into one of those rooms and get some work done. But yeah, it's like unbelievable just to see adults deranged in this way, and like the hypocrisy of like what they're using to accuse people they don't agree with, when they're actually the ones who are doing what they're accusing them of. Like, you're the one doing this. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Yeah, because I think we're about kids. It's somewhere on here, but I think the idea is that like it, to me, it really is training kids for this idea of magical thinking and lazy thinking, because it's showing the world is all about God. If you're confused about something, it's because God said this, and it really does breed in this hypocrisy to have people think inherently that what I believe is true and superior. Like facts don't matter at all. It's just it really is just what I believe, and I think we're seeing the consequences of that play out in a really horrific way in social media, in like experts don't matter anymore, like all of these things, because you're like, no, God will help my immune system. I don't need experts to tell me how to do this or how to eat right or any of these things. So I know I see it draped through all of the U.S. for sure, but Christianity in general. And so I think that's why like I love that there are at least people like you that if you're going to stay committed to the idea of a personal God and all these things, that at least I'd be happy to see a whole bunch of, I don't even call them Christians anymore, but like believers in God that are like, yeah, we still want a relationship with this supernatural being that we believe in. However, this material world is made up of some objective facts that perhaps we should follow, and we can't always put it on this supernatural being. Like I like the evolution of where you're going. Like again, where you're gonna end up, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. So I guess if someone was watching this, that would be your ideal avatar, for example. Like what would you say to them for why they should work with you for coaching, or where you could add value to their life?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I would say, hey, the person I ideally want to work with is someone who recognizes that the system of Christianity they were raised within is toxic, it's colonizing, it's supremacist. It has a lot of very deeply troubling features.
Psychopathic.
Yeah, that need to not perpetuate. We need to get that out of our own systems, out of our own worldviews, out of our practices, out of the way we perceive other people. We need to regain our ability to humanize people who aren't like us. Like, Christianity doesn't let you do that. So, like, if you're willing to let go of and walk away from these really harmful beliefs for reasons that we have explicitly found they are harmful, but you still have a value for it, walking with this personal God who knows you, loves you, and you want to just like do the work of reconciling who you are in relation to this God whilst cleaning up the mess you've been part of and indoctrinated with that's been harmful to people around you who don't believe like you. like, man, we can do some really good work, especially if you're queer and coming from that world. There's a
Right.
whole other layer of work and drama that needs to be addressed. You don't have to walk away from God in order to like embrace your orientation, right? To be who you are.
Right.
I don't know how much you're going to fit into the Christian box. I don't know how much I would want anyone I'm working with to have to fit into that. If they want to, they can. And I'll do the best I can to help them. But at the end of the day, the goal is like, let's get rid of the harm that's come from the things that we were raised with. And let's embrace a life-giving, permission-granting, flourishing way of life that we relate to God in and then give to others, you know?
Right. That's amazing. I really like that message.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I guess, I want to be respectful of your time, Mike. So, thanks so much for having this chat. It was even better than I had hoped. And
we didn't talk about X-Men at all.
I know. For everyone out there, Mike's website said he's a big X-Men fan, and the reason why I didn't go into it is because honestly, that would be another half hour.
Right, for sure.
At least. But honestly, thank you so much. Anytime you want to have another chat, I'd love to.
Let's do a part 2, Michael. I'm honored to have been here. Thanks for having me.
Amen.
I love what you're doing. Yeah, for sure. Let's do it again.
Cool. Thank you, man. Take
All right,
care.
for sure.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.